Decades passed, and the story of humanity's stand against the Veilith became legend. Textbooks were written about it, movies made, and monuments erected in cities around the world. The names Ethan Brooks, Lily Harper, and Ryan Carter were spoken with reverence, their actions immortalized as a turning point in human history. Yet for Ethan and Lily, life had moved on in quieter ways. Ethan spent his later years teaching astronomy at a small university. He loved sharing his passion for the stars with young minds, though he rarely spoke about his role in destroying one. His lectures focused on exploration and discovery, urging students to look beyond Earth's boundaries without repeating past mistakes. The universe is vast, he often said, but so is our potential. Let's use it wisely. Lily dedicated herself to linguistics, working to preserve endangered languages and cultures. She believed that understanding each other was key to avoiding future conflicts, whether with aliens or among humans. Her research took her to remote corners of the globe, where she listened to stories told by elders and recorded them for future generations. Words have power, she liked to say. They can build bridges or walls. Ryan, meanwhile, returned to engineering but shifted his focus to sustainable technology. He designed systems to clean polluted rivers, restore damaged ecosystems, and harness renewable energy. Though he never sought fame, his work earned him recognition as a pioneer in environmental innovation. "We messed up before," he once joked during an interview. "Let's try not to burn the place down this time." Despite their different paths, the three of them stayed close, meeting every year at the same park where they'd visited the memorial. It became a tradition, a chance to reflect on what they'd been through and how far the world had come. Over time, the gatherings grew smaller as old friends passed away, but Ethan and Lily continued to attend until they were too frail to walk. One autumn afternoon, many years after the Veilith conflict, Ethan sat alone on a bench near the memorial. His hair was white, and his hands trembled slightly, but his eyes still sparkled with curiosity. Beside him sat a young girl, no older than 10, who had introduced herself as Sophie. She was visiting the memorial with her parents and had struck up a conversation with Ethan. "What does this mean?" Sophie asked, pointing to the plaque. "Who are these people?" Ethan smiled faintly, leaning back against the bench. "They're heroes," he said simply. "They saved the world." The girl tilted her head, puzzled. "How?" "It's a long story," Ethan replied. "But the important thing is that they didn't give up, even when things seemed hopeless. They worked together and found a way to protect everyone." Sophie frowned thoughtfully. "Do you think we could do that? Save the world, I mean." Ethan chuckled softly. "I think anyone can, if they care enough. You just have to believe in yourself and in others." The girl nodded, satisfied with his answer, and ran off to join her parents. Ethan watched her go, feeling the sense of peace wash over him. Humanity wasn't perfect. It probably never would be, but it was learning. Slowly, step by step, people were finding better ways to live, to coexist, to dream. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Ethan closed his eyes, letting the cool breeze brush against his face. He thought about Sam, Lily, Ryan, and all the others who had stood beside him during those dark days. Their sacrifices hadn't been in vain. The world was healing, growing stronger because of them. When Ethan passed away a few months later, his final words echoed the sentiment he'd carried throughout his life. Even apes can change the stars. And so the legacy lived on, not just in monuments or stories, but in the hearts of those who dared to hope, to fight, and to build a brighter tomorrow. For all its flaws, humanity endured. And perhaps in time, it would shine like the stars above. Years passed, and the world began to heal. The scars left by the Veilith were deep, but humanity proved resilient. Cities once devastated by alien mining operations were rebuilt, their skylines rising again against the horizon. Families who had been torn apart found ways to reconnect, and communities came together to support one another. Life moved forward, though the memory of the Veilith lingered like a shadow. Ethan Brooks stood at the edge of a quiet park, his hands shoved into the pockets of his coat. It was a cool autumn day, the air crisp and tinged with the smell of fallen leaves. Around him, children laughed as they chased each other through piles of orange and yellow foliage. Couples strolled hand in hand, and elderly people sat on benches, feeding birds or reading books. The scene was peaceful, a stark contrast to the chaos of years past. But Ethan couldn't fully enjoy it. He often found himself thinking about the choices they had made, the lives lost, and the star destroyed. Helios had saved Earth, but at what cost? Uranus was gone, wiped from existence along with whatever life might have existed there. The thought weighed heavily on him, even now. Lily Harper joined him a few minutes later, her scarf wrapped tightly around her neck. She smiled faintly when she saw him, though her eyes carried the same sadness he felt. "You okay?" she asked gently. "I don't know," Ethan admitted. "Sometimes I wonder if we did the right thing, if there was another way." Lily nodded, looking out at the park. "I think about that too. But we'll never know for sure. All we can do is focus on what's ahead." They'd walked together in silence for a while, listening to the rustle of leaves and distant chatter. Eventually, they reached a memorial tucked away in a quiet corner of the park. It was simple, a stone plaque engraved with the names of those who had died during the conflict. Sam's name was there, along with Daniel's and countless others. Flowers surrounded the base, left by strangers who wanted to honor their sacrifice. Ethan knelt down, brushing a stray leaf off the plaque. "She gave everything," he said quietly, referring to Sam, "and we barely got to say goodbye." Lily placed a hand on his shoulder. She knew what she was doing. She believed in us, in humanity. That has to count for something. Ethan stood up, taking a deep breath. "I just wish I could tell her. Thank you." The two of them stayed there for a while, reflecting on all they had been through. They weren't the same people they'd been before the Vailith arrived. The experience had changed them, shaping them into leaders, fighters, survivors. And yet, they still struggled with guilt, not just for what they'd done, but for living when so many hadn't. As they left the park, they noticed a group of students walking toward the memorial. Their teacher, a young woman with glasses and a warm smile, was explaining its significance. "These people saved our world," she told them. "They showed us that even in the darkest times, we can find strength if we stand together." Ethan and Lily exchanged glances, neither saying a word. They didn't need to. Both understood that their actions had become part of history, a story passed down to inspire future generations. Whether humanity deserved such admiration was debatable, but the fact remained. They had fought back against impossible odds, and won. Later that evening, Ethan sat alone in his apartment, staring out the window at the night sky. Stars twinkled in the distance, tiny pinpricks of light scattered across an endless void. Somewhere out there was Uranus, or what used to be Uranus. The thought filled him with both pride and sorrow. He whispered to himself, almost too softly to hear, "We may have been called apes once, but even apes can change the stars." For better or worse, humanity had proven itself capable of greatness and destruction. What mattered now was how they chose to move forward. As long as people remembered the lessons of the past, Ethan believed they could build a brighter future, one step at a time. The return to Earth was bittersweet. Ethan Brooks, Lily Harper, and Ryan Carter landed their damaged cargo vessel in a remote desert, far from prying eyes. The journey back had been quiet, each of them lost in their thoughts. They were heroes, but none of them felt like one. The weight of what they'd done, the lives lost, the star destroyed, was too heavy to celebrate. As they stepped out of the ship, the dry heat hit them like a wall. Sand stretched endlessly in every direction, golden waves shimmering under the sun. A military convoy arrived shortly after, sent by the United Nations to retrieve them. Soldiers approached cautiously, their faces unreadable behind dark sunglasses. One officer, a tall man with graying hair, introduced himself as Colonel Hayes. "You're safe now," he said, his voice calm but firm. "We've got vehicles ready to take you to headquarters." Ethan nodded, though his mind was elsewhere. He glanced at Lily and Ryan, both looking exhausted. Their clothes were torn, their faces pale and drawn. None of them spoke as they climbed into the waiting trucks. The ride to the nearest base was long and uncomfortable, the air thick with unspoken questions. At the base, they were taken to a secure room for debriefing. Officials from various governments waited inside, their expressions serious. Cameras recorded every word as Ethan explained their mission: the creation of Helios, Sam's sacrifice, and the destruction of Uranus. When he finished, the room fell silent. No one knew how to respond. What they had done was unprecedented, both brilliant and horrifying. Finally, one of the officials, a woman with sharp features and piercing blue eyes, spoke up. "You saved humanity," she said slowly. "But at what cost? An entire star system is gone. Billions of lives. If the Vailith are anything like us." Lily flinched at the words, guilt flashing across her face. "We didn't have a choice," she said softly. "They would have destroyed Earth. We did what we had to do." The room erupted into murmurs, some agreeing with her, others shaking their heads in disbelief. Ethan clenched his fists under the table, frustration bubbling inside him. "We didn't ask for this war," he said firmly. "The Vailith treated us like animals. If we hadn't fought back, none of us would be here right now." The argument went on for hours, but eventually the officials agreed on one thing. Humanity owed its survival to Ethan, Lily, and Ryan. They were hailed as saviors, their names broadcast across the globe. People cheered in the streets, calling them heroes. Memorials were erected for Sam and the countless others who had died during the conflict. Despite the praise, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. He walked through the bustling city streets days later, watching as life slowly returned to normal. Shops reopened, families reunited, and laughter filled the air once more. But beneath the surface, cracks remained. Entire regions lay in ruins from the Vailith's mining operations, and millions were displaced. Recovery would take years, if not decades. One evening, Ethan met Lily at a small park near the outskirts of the city. She sat on a bench, staring at the sunset. Her green eyes reflected sadness, but also resolve. "Do you think we'll ever move past this?" she asked without looking at him. "I don't know," Ethan admitted, sitting beside her. "What we did, it changed everything. For better or worse, there's no going back." Lily sighed, leaning back against the bench. "I keep thinking about Sam, about everyone who didn't make it. Was it worth it?" Ethan hesitated before answering. "Yes," he said finally. "It was. Not because of what we gained, but because of what we protected. Humanity isn't perfect, but it's worth saving. And maybe, just maybe, we'll learn from this." As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, they sat in silence. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but they had faced impossible odds before and won. Whatever challenges lay in the future, they knew humanity would endure. It always did. The days after Sam's sacrifice felt endless. Ethan Brooks, Lily Harper, and Ryan Carter sat in silence aboard the battered cargo vessel, drifting through the cold emptiness of space. The radar screen showed no sign of pursuit. The Vailith ships had vanished, but none of them dared to relax. Helios was on its way to Uranus, but it would take hours, maybe even days, to reach the distant star system. Until then, all they could do was wait. Ethan stared at the control panel, his mind replaying every moment of their journey. He thought about Sam's final words, her determination to protect them. She had given her life so they could escape, and he couldn't shake the weight of that sacrifice. She shouldn't have done it, he muttered under his breath, more to himself than anyone else. Lily heard him and turned from the window where she'd been gazing out at the stars. "She didn't have a choice," she said softly. "None of us did. We're fighting for something bigger than ourselves." Ryan nodded, though his expression remained grim. Yeah, but that doesn't make it easier. I just hope it was worth it. Hours passed, each one feeling longer than the last. They'd rationed food and water, knowing they couldn't return to Earth until they were sure Helios had reached its target. The ship's systems were damaged during the escape, leaving them with limited power. The temperature inside dropped steadily, forcing them to wrap themselves in blankets to stay warm. Despite the discomfort, no one complained. They were alive, and that was enough. Finally, the moment arrived. A faint signal appeared on the ship's long-range scanner, a confirmation that Helios had reached Uranus and activated. Ethan leaned forward, his heart pounding as he watched the readings. "It's working," he whispered, almost afraid to believe it. "The star is destabilizing." Lily grabbed his arm, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and awe. "What happens now?" "We wait," Ethan replied. "If the chain reaction is strong enough, it'll force the Valith to retreat. They won't risk losing their homeworld." For what felt like an eternity, they monitored the situation. The data coming back from Helios showed fluctuations in the star's energy output. Tiny ripples at first, but growing stronger by the minute. Then suddenly, the signal cut out. The screen went dark. "What does that mean?" Ryan asked, his voice tight with anxiety. "It means the star collapsed," Ethan said slowly. "Helios did its job." A wave of relief washed over them, but it was short-lived. They knew the real test was yet to come. Would the Valith abandon Earth, or would they retaliate? The team braced themselves for whatever happened next. Back on Earth, the effects of Helios became clear within hours. The Valith ship hovering above Chicago began to emit strange vibrations, shaking violently before lifting off into the sky. People watched in stunned silence as the massive craft ascended higher and higher, eventually disappearing into the atmosphere. Reports poured in from around the globe. Every Valith outpost was evacuating, their forces retreating en masse. News outlets scrambled to cover the sudden departure, speculating about what had caused it. Governments held emergency meetings, trying to make sense of the aliens' abrupt withdrawal. For the first time in weeks, hope began to spread across the planet. On the cargo vessel, Ethan, Lily, and Ryan listened to the updates with mixed emotions. They had succeeded, but the cost had been high. Sam's sacrifice weighed heavily on their minds, as did the destruction of an entire star system. "We changed the universe today," Lily said quietly. "But I'm not sure we had the right." Ethan sighed, rubbing his temples. "Maybe not, but we did what we had to do. Humanity isn't perfect, but it's worth saving." As the ship limped back toward Earth, the three of them sat in silence, staring at the stars. They had faced impossible odds and emerged victorious, but the scars of their journey would never fade. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they knew one thing for certain. Humanity had proven it could fight for its survival, even against beings who once called them mere apes. The journey to the edge of the solar system was anything but smooth. Samantha Sam Cole piloted the cargo vessel with skill, weaving through asteroid fields and avoiding Valith patrols that roamed the outer reaches of Earth's orbit. The team sat in tense silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Ethan Brooks stared out a small porthole at the endless void of space, his mind racing with doubts. What if Helios failed? What if the Valith intercepted them before they reached their destination? Lily Harper tried to stay focused, reviewing the data on her tablet for the 100th time. She knew the weapon wasn't perfect. It had been damaged during the escape, but it was all they had. Ryan Carter tinkered with the controls of Helios, making last-minute adjustments. His hands moved quickly, but his brow was furrowed with worry. None of them spoke much. There was nothing left to say. Hours turned into days as the ship drifted farther from Earth. The Valith didn't give up easily. Patrols grew more frequent, their sleek ships darting through space like predators hunting prey. One night, Sam's voice broke the quiet. "We've got company," she said sharply, pointing to a cluster of blinking lights on the radar screen. 3 ships, closing fast. Ethan's heart sank. They were still hours away from the launch point. "Can we outrun them?" he asked, gripping the edge of his seat. "Not a chance," Sam replied, her tone grim. "They're too fast, but I can hold them off long enough for you to launch Helios." "No," Lily protested. "You'll get yourself killed." Sam gave her a wry smile. "Maybe. But if I don't, we all die anyway. Just make sure this thing works, all right?" Before anyone could argue, Sam veered the ship toward a nearby asteroid field. The rocky debris provided cover, but navigating through it was dangerous. The Valith ships followed, firing energy blasts that lit up the darkness. Alarms blared as the cargo vessel shuddered under the impact of near misses. "Hold on," Sam shouted, jerking the controls hard to the left. The ship narrowly avoided a collision with a massive asteroid, but the movement threw everyone off balance. Ethan stumbled into a wall, while Ryan clung to his seat, white-knuckled. "We're almost in position," Ryan called out, checking the coordinates. "Just a few more minutes." Sam gritted her teeth, pushing the ship to its limits. She zigzagged through the asteroids, using every trick she knew to evade the enemy. Behind them, one of the Valith ships exploded after colliding with a rock, but the other two kept coming. Their weapons tore through the field, sending shards of debris flying in all directions. Finally, Ryan yelled, "We're here. Launch Helios now." Ethan rushed to the control panel, his fingers flying over the buttons. With a deep breath, he activated the launch sequence. Helios detached from the ship and shot forward, disappearing into the vastness of space. For a moment, no one spoke. They watched the weapons streak away, carrying their hopes, and humanity's survival with it. But their relief was short-lived. The remaining Valith ships closed in, their weapons trained on the cargo vessel. Sam turned to face the others, her expression resolute. "Go," she said simply. "I'll keep them busy." "Sam," Lily started, tears welling in her eyes. "No time for goodbyes," Sam interrupted. "Just promise me you'll win this fight." With that, she spun the ship around and accelerated toward the enemy. Ethan and the others could only watch as Sam charged head-on into the Valith ships, firing everything she had. Explosions filled the screen, lighting up the cabin in flashes of orange and red. Then suddenly, Sam's ship vanished in a blinding burst of light. The cabin fell silent. Ethan clenched his fists, struggling to hold back his emotions. Lily wiped her eyes, her hands trembling. Ryan stared at the empty screen, his jaw tight. They had lost Sam, but her sacrifice had given them a chance. "All we can do now is wait," Ethan said finally, his voice steady despite the pain. "Helios is on its way. It's out of our hands." As the ship drifted silently through space, the weight of what they had done and what they had lost settled over them. They had gambled everything on a desperate plan, and now all they could do was hope it worked. The fate of Earth rested on a weapon hurtling toward a distant star, and the lives of billions depended on whether it succeeded. The days leading up to the launch of Project Helios were tense. The team worked around the clock, fine-tuning every detail of the weapon. Ethan Brooks moved between stations, checking progress and offering encouragement. His calm demeanor masked the storm of emotions inside him. He knew the stakes. Failure meant the end of humanity, but he couldn't let doubt take hold. Not now. Lily Harper stayed focused on her diversion plan. She sent the fake message to the Valith ship, embedding it in a burst of static that mimicked natural space interference. If everything went as planned, the aliens would believe Earth had discovered another resource-rich planet in a distant part of the galaxy. This would buy the team precious time to complete Helios and send it on its way. Ryan Carter pushed himself to the limit, ensuring the weapon was ready for launch. His hands were calloused from hours of work, and dark circles formed under his eyes. But he didn't complain. "We've got one shot at this," he reminded the team during a late-night meeting. "If we mess it up, there's no second chance." As the final preparations began, disaster struck. One of the engineers, Daniel Morse, approached Ethan with a worried expression. Daniel had been quiet throughout the project, often working alone and avoiding group discussions. Now he hesitated before speaking. "Ethan, I need to tell you something," he said, his voice trembling. "What is it?" Ethan asked, sensing trouble. Daniel looked away, guilt written all over his face. I gave them information about the project. They'd promised to protect my family if I helped them. For a moment, Ethan froze. Betrayal hit him like a punch to the gut. "Who did you talk to?" he demanded, his voice low but sharp. "The Valeth," Daniel admitted. "They contacted me days ago. I didn't want to do it, but they threatened to hurt my wife and kids. I didn't have a choice." Ethan clenched his fists, anger bubbling inside him. But he forced himself to stay calm. "You should have told us," he said firmly. "We could have protected your family. Now you've put everyone at risk." Before Daniel could respond, alarms blared through the facility. The Valeth had detected the anomaly caused by their work and dispatched drones to investigate. The team scrambled into action, abandoning the lab and loading the incomplete Helios onto a transport vehicle. Time was running out. "We can't stay here," Ryan shouted, helping load the last piece of equipment. "They'll be here any minute." Lily grabbed her bag, her mind racing. "What about Daniel?" she asked Ethan. Ethan shook his head. "He made his choice. We can't trust him now." Moments later, the team fled the facility in separate vehicles, heading for a rendezvous point miles away. Behind them, the lab was swarmed by Valeth drones. Explosions lit up the night sky as the aliens destroyed everything in their path. From a safe distance, Ethan watched the chaos unfold. His heart sank as he saw Daniel being dragged out of the wreckage by 2 Valeth soldiers. Despite his betrayal, Ethan felt a pang of sorrow when the aliens executed him on the spot. It was a grim reminder of who they were dealing with. The team regrouped at the rendezvous point, shaken but alive. Helios was damaged but still functional. They loaded it onto a modified cargo vessel piloted by Samantha Sam Cole, a skilled rogue pilot who had agreed to help them. As they prepared for liftoff, Sam turned to Ethan. "Where are we headed?" she asked. "To the edge of the solar system," Ethan replied. "It's the only place we can launch Helios without being detected." Sam nodded. "Then let's get moving. We don't have much time." As the ship ascended into the sky, Ethan glanced back at Earth one last time. The planet looked small and fragile from above, a pale blue dot surrounded by endless blackness. He knew what they were risking, not just their lives, but the future of humanity itself. But there was no turning back now. They had a mission to complete, and failure wasn't an option. Ethan Brooks, Lily Harper, and Ryan Carter spent long nights piecing together a plan. The Valeth's ultimatum hung over them like a storm cloud, but they refused to give up. If the aliens thought humanity would roll over without a fight, they were wrong. Ethan knew they had to act quickly, but blindly attacking the Valeth would be suicide. They needed something smarter, something unexpected. One evening, as they reviewed their findings in the lab, Ethan spoke up. "We've been focusing on their ship, but what if we hit them where it really hurts? Their home." Lily looked at him sharply. "You mean their planet?" "No," Ethan said, shaking his head. "Their star. Tyrannus, the star system they came from. If we can destabilize it, even slightly, it'll force them to retreat. They won't risk losing their homeworld." Ryan raised an eyebrow. "That's ambitious. How do you even destabilize a star?" Ethan hesitated, then pulled up a diagram on the screen. "We create a device, a weapon, that manipulates stellar matter. It's risky, but possible. If we aim it just right, we can trigger a chain reaction that makes the star unstable, enough to scare them off anyway." Lily frowned, her mind racing. "This isn't just dangerous, it's insane. We're talking about messing with forces we barely understand. What if it blows up in our faces?" "I know," Ethan admitted, "but think about it. The Valeth aren't invincible. If we don't try this, They'll destroy Earth piece by piece. At least this gives us a fighting chance." Ryan leaned back in his chair, tapping his fingers on the table. "Assuming we can build this thing, how do we get it close enough to their star? And how do we keep them from stopping us?" "We launch it remotely," Ethan replied. "From the edge of our solar system. It'll take time to reach Uranus, but if we're careful, they won't see it coming." The trio fell silent, each lost in their thoughts. The plan was reckless, bordering on impossible, but it was all they had. After a few moments, Lily nodded slowly. "All right, let's do it. But we'll need help and resources." Over the next few days, they reached out to trusted colleagues, gathering a small team of scientists and engineers. They worked in secret, knowing that any leak could alert the Valeth. The project, codenamed Helios, required components scattered across the globe. Rare metals, advanced circuits, and experimental technology. Each piece had to be smuggled to a hidden facility outside Chicago, where the team assembled the weapon under constant threat of discovery. Ryan took charge of designing the mechanism, pouring every ounce of his creativity into the task. He worked tirelessly, tweaking blueprints and running simulations late into the night. "If we screw this up," he muttered to himself one evening, "we're dead. Or worse." Meanwhile, Lily focused on creating a diversion. She crafted a fake message, encoded in a way that mimicked Byleth communication patterns. The message claimed that Earth had discovered another planet rich in the resources the aliens demanded. Her hope was to buy time by sending the Valeth on a wild goose chase. Ethan coordinated everything, making sure the pieces came together smoothly. He felt the weight of leadership pressing down on him, but he didn't falter. Every decision mattered now. One mistake could doom them all. As the days passed, the team grew closer, united by a shared sense of purpose. They joked to relieve tension, sharing stories of their families and dreams for the future, if there was a future. Despite the odds, they believed in what they were doing. Humanity wasn't perfect, but it was worth saving. Finally, after weeks of grueling work, Project Helios began to take shape. The weapon was massive, designed to harness energy on an unimaginable scale. It wasn't pretty, but it was functional, or so they hoped. As the finishing touches were added, Ethan gathered the team for a final briefing. "This is it," he said, his voice steady. "We don't know if this will work, but we have to try. For Earth, for everyone who's counting on us." No one spoke. They simply nodded, their eyes reflecting determination and fear. The countdown to launch had begun. The tension in the air was palpable as the world waited for the Valeth's next move. Days turned into a week, and humanity held its breath, unsure of what to expect. Then, without warning, the aliens made their announcement. It came in the form of a global broadcast, transmitted directly into every device on Earth. The Valeth leader, Zoreth, appeared on screens everywhere, its glowing eyes staring coldly into the hearts of billions. "Listen carefully, Apes," Zoreth began, its voice laced with disdain. "Your planet holds resources we require. You will surrender them to us, or face destruction." The room where Ethan Brooks, Lily Harper, and Ryan Carter had been working fell silent. They stared at the screen, their faces pale with disbelief. Zoreth went on to list specific minerals, rare elements buried deep within Earth's crust, that the Valeth demanded. These materials were vital for advanced technology, and mining them would devastate entire regions. The ultimatum left no room for negotiation. When reporters tried to ask questions during the broadcast, the Valeth ignored them. Instead, Zoreth sneered, "Do not waste our time with your meaningless protests. Your kind is weak and unworthy of respect. Submit or perish." As the transmission ended, chaos erupted across the globe. News channels scrambled to cover reactions from world leaders, who were equally shocked and outraged. Some called for immediate resistance, while others urged caution, hoping diplomacy could still save the day. Ethan clenched his fists, anger burning inside him. How could they treat humanity this way? But he forced himself to stay calm. Anger wouldn't solve anything. Not now. Lily broke the silence first. "This isn't just about resources," she said firmly. "They're testing us, seeing how far they can push before we fight back." Ryan nodded, pacing back and forth. "And if we don't push back, they'll take everything. They'll strip the planet bare." Ethan leaned against the table, his mind racing. He thought about the strange energy readings from the Vailith ship and the tiny delays in their movements. There had to be a reason for those inconsistencies. If the aliens were truly invincible, why bother with such careful behavior? Something didn't add up. "We need to focus on what we know," Ethan said finally. "Their arrogance, it's a mask. They're hiding something. Maybe fear, maybe weakness. Either way, it's our only chance." Over the next few days, governments debated how to respond. Military leaders argued for preparing for war, while scientists pleaded for more time to study the Vailith. Public opinion was split. Protests grew larger, with crowds chanting slogans like "Earth belongs to us" and "No surrender." Despite the turmoil, Ethan, Lily, and Ryan continued their work. They pored over data, searching for any clue that might give humanity an edge. One evening, as they reviewed recordings of the Vailith broadcast, Lily noticed something odd. She replayed a segment where Zorith mentioned Earth's resources. "Listen to this part again," she said, pointing to the screen. "Right here, there's a slight pause before they name the minerals." Ethan frowned, leaning closer. Sure enough, there was a brief hesitation, almost too quick for the human ear to catch. "You're right," he murmured. "It's like they're choosing their words carefully." Ryan crossed his arms, thinking hard. What if they're lying? What if these resources aren't even that important to them? The idea sparked hope in all of them. If the Vailith were bluffing, then humanity might have more leverage than anyone realized. But proving it wouldn't be easy. They needed concrete evidence, and fast. That night, as Ethan walked home through empty streets, he couldn't shake the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. The Vailith saw humans as insignificant, but Ethan knew better. Humanity wasn't perfect, but it was resilient. And resilience, he thought, was a weapon in itself. Back at the lab, Lily and Ryan stayed late, poring over new data. They weren't heroes, not yet, but they were determined to become ones. Whatever happened next, they vowed to stand together. For now, though, all they could do was keep searching for answers. The clock was ticking, and the fate of the world rested in their hands. The news of the Vailith's arrival spread quickly, sparking a mix of fear and fascination around the globe. Social media was flooded with videos and photos of the towering aliens, their glowing eyes, and their sleek, insect-like forms. Some people were excited, hoping the visitors would bring new knowledge or technology. Others were terrified, convinced the Vailith had come to conquer Earth. Governments held emergency meetings, trying to decide how to respond, but opinions were divided. In Chicago, Ethan Brooks couldn't stop thinking about the strange behavior of the Vailith. He replayed every moment of their meeting in his mind, focusing on the tiny delays he'd noticed in their movements. Something about them didn't add up. Were they truly as confident as they seemed, or was there a crack in their armor? He shared his thoughts with Lily Harper during a late-night discussion at a small cafe near the landing site. "They're hiding something," Ethan said, stirring his coffee absent-mindedly. "I don't know what it is yet, but I'm sure of it." Lily nodded, her green eyes thoughtful. "You're right. They acted like they were superior, but some of their responses felt rehearsed, like they were trying too hard to convince us." Ethan leaned forward. "If we can figure out what they're hiding, maybe we'll have a chance to stand up to them. But we need more information." The next day, the world grew even more divided. In some countries, protests erupted, with angry crowds shouting slogans like, "We are not apes," and demanding action against the Vailith. Other nations called for peace, urging humanity to cooperate with the aliens. Meanwhile, scientists worked tirelessly to study the Vailith's ship, which remained parked above Chicago. Strange energy readings had been detected coming from the vessel, but no one could get close enough to investigate further. Back in the United States, tensions ran high. The president addressed the nation, promising to protect Earth while exploring diplomatic options. However, many doubted the government's ability to handle the situation. Rumors began to circulate that the military was preparing for war, though officials denied it. Ethan and Lily watched the chaos unfold on TV, feeling both frustrated and helpless. One evening, Lily received an unexpected call from Ryan Carter, an engineer she'd worked with on previous projects. Ryan was known for his creativity and resourcefulness, often coming up with solutions no one else thought of. He had heard about the energy readings from the Vailith ship and wanted to help. "I've been looking into those readings," Ryan explained when they met at a lab downtown. "They're unlike anything we've seen before. If we can analyze them properly, we might be able to find a weakness." Ethan joined the conversation, intrigued by Ryan's enthusiasm. Together, the three of them began brainstorming ideas. They knew time was running out. Whatever the Vailith wanted, they wouldn't wait forever. As they worked late into the night, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that humanity was standing on the edge of a cliff. One wrong move, and everything could collapse. Despite the pressure, Ethan found himself inspired by the determination of his team. Lily pored over recordings of the Vailith's speech, searching for hidden meanings in their words. Ryan tinkered with equipment, building tools to detect faint signals from the alien ship. Even in the face of overwhelming odds, they refused to give up. But not everyone shared their optimism. Around the world, panic continued to spread. Stores were empty of food and supplies as people prepared for the worst. Families huddled together, unsure if they'd survive the coming days. The Vailith's presence loomed over everything, casting a shadow of uncertainty across the planet. Ethan looked out the window one night, watching the stars twinkle in the sky. He wondered if anyone out there was watching Earth too. For now, all he could do was keep working, keep searching for answers. Whatever happened next, he knew one thing for certain. Humanity's fate rested in the hands of those willing to fight for it, and he intended to be one of them. In the year 2145, something extraordinary happened. A massive spacecraft descended from the sky and hovered above Chicago. It was so large that it blocked out the sun, casting a shadow over the entire city. People gathered in the streets, staring up in awe and fear at the alien ship. No one knew what to expect. The world held its breath. The visitors called themselves the Vailith. They were tall, with shiny exoskeletons that reflected light like mirrors. Their eyes glowed faintly, giving them an otherworldly appearance. When they spoke, their voices sounded cold and mechanical, as if they had no emotions. To humans, they seemed more like machines than living beings. And yet, they were undeniably intelligent and frighteningly powerful. Ethan Brooks stood among the crowd of scientists and diplomats waiting to meet the aliens. He was a quiet man in his early 40s, with short brown hair and glasses perched on his nose. As an astrophysicist, he had spent most of his life studying the stars, but nothing could have prepared him for this moment. Beside him stood Lily Harper, a linguist with sharp green eyes and a determined expression. Her job was to try to communicate with the Vailith, though she wasn't sure where to begin. When the Vailith finally stepped out of their ship, they moved with unnatural precision, their long legs carrying them effortlessly across the ground. One of them, taller than the rest, approached the human delegation. This leader introduced itself as Zorath. Its voice echoed through the air, sending chills down everyone's spines. "You are primitive," Zorath said without hesitation. "Your kind is no better than apes." The words stung, but Ethan kept his composure. He glanced at Lily, who clenched her fists tightly. She wanted to argue, to prove them wrong, but she knew it wouldn't do any good. Not yet. Instead, she focused on analyzing their language, trying to find patterns or clues that might help bridge the gap between their species. For hours, the humans attempted to engage the Vailith in conversation. Ethan explained Earth's achievements, its technology, art, and science, but the aliens showed no interest. They dismissed everything he said with a wave of their clawed hands. "Your accomplishments are insignificant," Zoreth declared. "You waste time on trivial matters while we master the universe." Lily tried to ask questions about the Valeth's culture, hoping to learn more about them, but they refused to answer. Instead, they mocked her efforts, calling her attempts at communication pathetic. Each insult made her angrier, but she forced herself to stay calm. Losing her temper wouldn't solve anything. As the meeting dragged on, Ethan began to notice something odd. The Valeth's movements weren't perfectly synchronized, as he'd initially thought. There were tiny delays, almost imperceptible hesitations, when they responded to questions. At first he wondered if it was just his imagination, but the more he observed, the surer he became. Something wasn't right. By the end of the day, the Valeth abruptly ended the meeting and returned to their ship. The humans were left standing in silence, unsure of what to do next. Ethan turned to Lily, his mind racing. "Did you notice how they reacted?" he asked quietly. "There's something off about them. I think they're hiding something." Lily nodded, her anger replaced by curiosity. "We need to figure out what it is," she said. "If we can understand them better, maybe we'll have a chance." Little did they know, their observations would lead to discoveries far beyond what they could imagine. For now, though, they simply walked away from the landing site, their hearts heavy but their resolve unshaken. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they knew one thing for certain: humanity couldn't afford to give up.